and they are playing a round. Is it a round 5 game? Yeah, in the candidate tournament, which decides who will play the reigning world champion Yasugi 99. And if we take a quick look at their overall standings, we see that JannLee is second in the game percentage, behind Katask, who has scored 2 super impressive 10-0 victories versus Burpcow and Kleerkast. So JannLee not only needs to win this match against Kleerkast, but also needs to win big. JannLee is undefeated so far. He tied his match against Bugzilla, but he has won his other matches by a clear margin. Katask has a perfect score this far, winning all 4 matches. I saw that JannLee is online, and we'll be following him. JannLee is rated some 200 points above Kleerkast, so that clearly makes him the favorite to take this. Welcome everybody. Nice to have some spectators. Do we have any predictions about the outcome of this match? Well, obviously I think JannLee will win, and let's say 7-3 or 8-2 maybe. Both players are online, so we're just waiting for them to take their seats. And they will be playing 10 games regardless of the outcome. Every single game counts in the overall standing. So in a minute or so they will start their match. We can take a quick look again at the overall standings. As you can see by looking at the points. Hi there, Zaraza. The players have played. I have not played the same number of matches. For instance, Blitzbullet at the first. At the top, he's played a lot more matches than Katask and Operviz and so on. Actually, the finisher, who's in 12th place, has only played 2 matches. Good afternoon. But let's see here. Have they started? Not quite yet. Yeah, Midnight Fox is mentioning the disastrous loss against Katask. But Kleerkast was... the result didn't really reflect the actual play in the game, because Kleerkast was pressuring Katask in several games. And he will put pressure on JannLee today also. So Zaraza is complaining about the stream quality. Is anyone else having problems? Welcome, Opper. Just let me know if there's something wrong with the stream, and I will see if I can fix it. So still no game. Let's go back here. Looks like they played maybe half of the games. And Burpcow in 11th place only has 2 more matches to play. So, who can challenge Katask in the top? Well, it's all about these three players, I think. They are the only ones who can take the first place. And JannLee and Operavision, they need to beat Katask. Probably both of them to have a chance, because Katask wins his matches by such a big margin. Oh, good to hear, Zarza. Yeah, actually, the finisher is also unbeaten, but he tied his match against Burp Cow, and Burp Cow is down at the bottom. So I don't think the finisher will can challenge Katask. And maybe you're right. But I'm really looking forward to the heavyweight matches between Katask and JannLee and Katask and Operavision. So we're still waiting for the players to get seated and get started. Yeah, the only player so far that has put some real pressure on Katask was Zixon, actually, in their match. Also, Kleerkast managed to get some good position, but Katask showed what a tremendous defender he is, on top of his attacking skills and his speed and his theoretical knowledge and everything. And that's the thing with Katask, you need to beat him not only once in the opening, you need to beat him in the middle game, and also you need to finish him. You need to get that knockout blow. Not sure what we're waiting for. The players were here on time. I can see both Kleerkast and JannLee. They are green. And now they're ready. And these guys know each other really well. They have played more than 300 games against each other. JannLee scoring something like, what is it, 4-1 almost. So that would mean maybe 8-2. As a final result, we'll see. I'm sure we will see a lot of really interesting and creative Crazy House games, that's for sure. And in case we have any viewers that haven't played this game before, you might wonder what you're watching. This is Crazy House. Whenever you capture a piece, you pick it up, you get it in hand, it changes color, and then you can place it on the board when it's your turn. Instead of moving one of your pieces on the board, you can place the piece you have in hand. So this is interesting. JannLee waits and doesn't develop the queenside knight. And so this knight doesn't have a place to go, really. It could be trapped, or more or less trapped. When Black plays bishop d7, he has a tactical idea here of taking on e5, and when white takes on d7, black can take back, winning a pawn. So that's why white goes back. So JannLee decides to develop his knight after all. Then it would probably be better to just play knight c3 instead of retreating with the bishop. I'm not sure if the extra tempo spent by white means anything. In fact, sometimes the black bishop is worse on d7 than it is on c8. And black needs to be careful here because white has a strong grip in the center and extra space here. He has a semi-open b file, and this bishop is pointing towards the h7 pawn, and this bishop is good too. So a pseudo sacrifice here by black, just trying to get free. He will probably get material back because white cannot just flee with a bishop. Then you take it and the rook takes, and you can place a bishop maybe here on c4. So white just gives the material back and aims for the g7 square, which is the weak spot in the black king side. And this could get ugly really quickly here. White might even just take g7, but you don't really want to surrender the e5 pawn that easily. No, he defends the e5 pawn. So probably just take g7. This knight is almost trapped. White is going for the knight here, bringing this knight closer to the enemy king. Maybe knight here, knight takes, and then you can start thinking about mate. And this is really close to mate now. When white picks up this, he can place a knight on h6 and a diagonal on g7, and it's mate. So white threatening knight h6 mate. And white has a healthy lead in material, everything under control. This is a win for sure for white. b7 is hanging as well, and obviously knight at f6 just cleans the house. Nice win for JannLee there. He made it look effortless. Kleerkast will most likely play his kingside fianchetto line. We've seen this a lot in his games, both with white and black. Let's see what JannLee has prepared. Welcome everybody. So one idea is to at some point capture f3 and then maybe go for the d4 pawn. I'm not sure about this idea though. This bishop, of course, I mean, a bishop is usually slightly better than a knight, but it takes a while to go and get the bishop on d6, and when you take on d6, black simply takes toward the center and strengthens the center. So one idea for black here would be to simply take on g3, and this passive bishop placement is a sign of things not going too well for white here. Back in, you see the 4 knights facing off against 4 bishops, and black is doing just fine here. So this is a natural move on the semi-open C file. Sometimes you might consider taking on F2. Maybe not here though. Although there are some weaknesses here on E3 and so on. Also at some point black might take on H4, give a piece for 2 pawns, and trying to strip the white king of his defenses. So where does this knight go? It's not going anywhere. Black is moving forward. Opening the C2 square for a bishop. And this queen is in a tight spot here. Because if it goes to E1, maybe black will take on D4 and place a pawn on E2. Very interesting sacrifice here by JannLee. And these bishops, they are indeed covering the white king, but they are also in a very passive place. So the threat here is pawn at E2. Also given the chance, what black could move the bishop back, maybe fork on C2, and also bishop D3. The pawn landing on E2 will do even more harm to the white position. So black has sacrificed a piece, but he does have 2 pawns for the piece. At the moment. So black wants to get rid of this annoying knight. And why not bring the queen out? Because now you can take on B2 maybe. And it's looking weak here on the 7th rank. I foresee maybe a pawn or 2 dropping on the 7th rank shortly. And actually this queen is very strong here on the 7th rank, also protecting G7. So black goes for the light squares here. It does take a while for white to get anywhere. If you take on F8, Black is already knocking on the door of the white castle, so white needs to spend some time. And black is simply quicker here. If white takes, maybe even knight h3 in between. And now there's a mating threat on g2, so white won't have the chance to take on f8. In fact, he's about to get mated here. Black can just play pawn g2 and pick up the rook. Maybe rook g2 or pawn g2 threatening rook at h1. It's all over. Once again, a really nice game here by JannLee. And it wasn't made the next move. So 2-0. Very impressive. Hi, Chess Mitra. So this time white saves the tempo. He didn't move it to b5 and then back. Although now black might take the opportunity to develop his light squared bishop outside the pawn chain. Black giving a piece for some hopefully long-term compensation, but white could be really quick here and simply play rook f1, king g1, and then who benefited for the missing f pawn? Looks like white will benefit from the open f file. Black is sort of drifting into a very passive position. He only plays with the pieces he has in hand. Much easier to find good moves for white here. White might even consider taking on f5. Let's say take f5 and develop the knight and bring his other rook to f1. Or maybe rook takes f5 and then perhaps bishop at f4 just to stop any pawn push tricks. Picking up the d pawn, yeah, he does indeed take. I was thinking maybe white should have stopped the f pawn here, but maybe it's not so dangerous either. Yeah, so JannLee did foresee this. So obviously the dark squares here are a target. It's not so easy to see what black should do with that rook. Knight at f6 is maybe a threat. Probably picking up a queen. So just take g7, because if the knight takes, you can take on c5. Maybe white can do something like take on e6, but he just plays calmly here. Doesn't risk anything. If black takes, white can take back with the bishop, hitting f7. And JannLee is just in perfect control here. Very instructive play indeed. So you probably just take somewhere here on e6. So many good moves here for white. Maybe bishop f5. What can black do? Nothing. Oh, bishop f5. And I expect a resign there. Yep. 3-0 JannLee. And JannLee doesn't mind repeating the same moves. He got a very decent position out of the opening. Mixing it up slightly. Threatening to take on f3 and then capture the d4 pawn. So white leaves the d4 pawn en prise here. But g4 is hanging. I wonder how you do this. You could of course take on e5. Maybe h5 is an idea, but looks a bit dubious. So JannLee just takes on e5. So this knight is annoying. Black has pressure on the f2 square. Maybe knight d3 hitting c5, protecting f2. Although black might consider just taking on f2 anyway, because he will get some material and he will get a pawn for h3. Or I could just move back somewhere. Probably not to b6 though, because a pawn on c5 will completely shut it out. And d4 is indeed a square also. Keeping the pressure on f2. And a quick response here. Black is inviting capture here on g4, opening the h5. Now b6 looks like a safe square to retreat to. Not clear what the knight is doing here on b5. So simply take the rook on f1, and I'm wondering here, this just looks good for black. Yeah, push the h pawn. This is horrible. Let's say g4, you can probably play knight g3 check and capture. The rook is checking the king, and you have rook at h2 and mate. So what is white supposed to do here? I don't know. Taking here on g3 or even with the knight is already a threat. And JannLee is making this look very easy. Kleerkast hasn't been able to touch him yet. So we'll take with the pawn, or we'll take with the knight. He's taking with the knight, forcing pawn takes, and king g2, and that king is about to get mated because you have rook h2 and then queen h4 mate. Resigns. 4-0. Wow. JannLee has been doing really well in this opening, so he doesn't mind repeating. This time black puts his bishop outside the pawn chain, which is good for the bishop, but perhaps not good for the defense here on the queen side. But this is probably how he should do it. Just break the pin. And I wonder, maybe white should take the knight after all here. Surely knight e3 will come, hitting f5 and protecting c2. And if you have any suggestions, moves or questions, feel free to ask me. I'll try to answer as well as I can. Is it time to swing this knight over to the, well, it is already on the king's side, but having it on e2 is not so comfortable. So now f5 is hanging, and I like the way he captured with the f pawn, opening the f file. White might consider taking twice here on f5, as in the game before. Although this time black has some pressure here on the queen side. So maybe this is the time when you take on f5, because now when the bishop has left f8, g7 is more weak. And white might consider bishop at f8 or something, because captures, and knight f6. You have some discovered check tricks. And JannLee is just moving in like a boa constrictor here. The queen is hitting f5. Hard to defend that pawn. And this pawn is really vital for black. Yeah, bishop at f6 was also a possibility. So white is piling up on this pawn, trying to induce g6, which would damage the defenses of the dark squares. So white has managed to lure this pawn one step forward. And the queen is about to infiltrate here. So do you maybe go bishop g7? I was thinking bishop g7, rook here, maybe take here and sacrifice the queen when you black takes on g7. But maybe I'm just being a bit delirious. White inviting a lot of piece trades here. If white gets the chance, he will take on e7 and place the bishop on f6, forking whatever is standing on e7 and the rook in the corner. So one idea here, take on f5, pawn g7, grab the pawn on h7. JannLee doesn't mind giving his queen here because he has such a strong grip. Super strong grip. Everything is well defended. But he would like to have a knight. And because white would like to have a knight, that more or less forces black to keep his knights in hand, so he cannot use them really. And then they would be in danger of getting captured. Maximum activity here for the white pieces. Look at those rooks and bishops and bishops and even the knight. All the white pieces participating, and e6 is probably the key to open up the black defenses for a final kill. Just take here maybe, and knight f6. Isn't that the way to go? Although there are some tricks here maybe. What about knight here and yeah, and rook in the corner maybe? Why do you check here first? Wasn't rook h1 good? Okay, so he gets his checks. And this is very dangerous. Looks like JannLee overplayed his position. Nice little trick here. Rook E1 mate. That was quite a comeback by Kleerkast. White had a super position, but he let black off the hook, and when Kleerkast got off the hook, he was ready to counter punch. We can just take a quick look at what happened in the end there, because JannLee must have been doing just fine here. Or maybe he isn't. He's not doing fine. I was thinking E6 was good, but apparently not. So many strong moves here. It's actually mate in 9. And knight at F3 is indeed the right move. So perfectly executed counterattack there by Kleerkast. But was it the queen sacrifice maybe? Where did White misplay this? So White shouldn't give away the d4 pawn. That's probably important. Yeah, you should just take on f5 instead. That looks about right. Because if you take on f5, you even have tricks like pawn at a7 here, trying to queen. Anyway, let's get back to the game. And I just want to make sure I'm following. So what happened in the opening? E4, E5. So black has won a pawn. And also managed to create weaknesses on the dark squares. And those dark squares are not so easy to cover, not at all. A bishop on d4 would probably be devastating. Yeah, you know the theory here, I suppose, Opper. I know absolutely nothing. So this looks dangerous, grabbing the rook, but White doesn't have any pawns or bishops here for the dark squares. And also the last rank here might turn out to be a problem. Problem for White. So black could just go maybe bishop d4, a pawn on f4. Still no threats here. And e1 is a square also, hitting these two guys. JannLee is a master of making use of the whole board. And Kleerkast is so much behind here on time. Why didn't White take the bishop on d7? We can look at it after the game, maybe. So the black forces are just moving ahead here. The queen is in trouble. And if the queen leaves e2, something will land on e2. And let's see in the opening there. Black played bishop d7, which, if it's prep, it's not very much liked by the computer. It says it's a bad blunder. But this is already good for black. Although knight d4 was even better. So here, why didn't he take on d7? Well, the queen can take here on c1. Okay, back to the game. JannLee is leading by 5-1. And we see a different opening here. Black is sacrificing a pawn, but white doesn't take the bait, just develops calmly. And well, the black opening has been a slight success because white has spent a lot of time in the opening. And this should be perfectly fine for black. So black is giving up his queen just for long-term compensation. If you take on g2, simply pawn g4 will put great pressure on white. So white had better just leave this guy alone. When you play d4, you also open for the bishop, so this guy is not going back to f4 anymore. And if you can take on f3, then suddenly you can go back to h4. Yeah, black has interesting compensation here. White is trying to pry the position open with a thrust here in the center, but this bishop not only pins this knight, but it also covers f7. I was thinking before that white could play queen g3, but that was before the bishop landed on d6. Yeah, perhaps the bishop on d6 was overly passive. And that was an interesting move because black could have taken the queen, but then queen at f7 is mate. So it does indeed look like white has got what it wanted here. Maybe queen f3, threatening queen at f7. Will queen at f3 simply pick up the knight on g2? And obviously e6 was hanging as well. The rook will get away with check. And black doesn't have enough here. Far from it. G7 is hanging as well. And all of a sudden a rook might land here on C8. I was thinking rook at C8 was over already. But maybe this is even better. So queen G7 and my mate here somewhere. Queen D5 mate. Nice one by JannLee. 6-1 and 3 games to go. So slightly different setup here by Kleerkast with an early bishop G5, and then JannLee goes for the kingside fianchetto, gaining a tempo here on the bishop. And we saw Kleerkast playing stuff like this. You can take here and then a knight at f4 at some point maybe. And Kleerkast played his light squared bishop to d3, so taking on f6 and then knight at f4 would hit the g pawn, so we just took twice here on g6. Now there are no more bishop takes f6 tricks. And when the bishop needs to go back, that means white should have played it to d3 to start with. So how does black continue here? Maybe knight b4 is an idea. So this queen move makes a rook lift possible. So hard to find good ideas here for both players actually. Maybe you should keep this bishop though. can you? No, probably not. Well, now you can go to g4. Or plug a knight on e4 again. So maybe you take on g3 here, because if white takes with the f pawn, you can trade on d3 and then play bishop at g5. Although knight at f4 then. But it does weaken the white position. Taking here, bishop g5. Maybe you can take on d4 with the knight. JannLee, you need to wake up. You only have 20 seconds left now. So white takes with the h pawn, okay. But then black is just perfectly fine. So white giving a piece here just to create some weaknesses of the light squares. It does indeed look like he gained some momentum here. That queen looking really awkward on b8. And this knight is super strong. It might pick up c7 or... So black gives his queen. Trying to stay alive here. Black will need to place those pieces he has in hand really quickly around his king, or else he will get mated. So taking h6 looks tempting. And knight g4 probably. Because then you can bring in the queen, maybe just pick up g6 and continue the attack. And this is another nice try. Opens up the h5 square for a queen. So maybe bishop here, pawn here, picking up the rook. Yeah, it looks devastating. No, sorry, pawn here, the rook takes. Okay. So just take on f8 then. Or you get a pawn. But where's the mate? Is it here somewhere? You could just give up one queen. Yeah, that one or the other. And now there is no way to interpose. Nice finish there by Kleerkast. 2 games to go. So no knight f6 this time. This is different. Instead the knight is heading out this way. So what do you do? Do you push the h-pawn up the board maybe? You pin e2, threatening to take on d4. Although if black takes on d4, white is happy to recapture and give the queen for a piece and a pawn. So the bishop on h5 is slightly annoying for white here. White would like to break the pin somehow. What if can black take on d4 maybe and then pawn g4? Never mind. I'm thinking maybe black would like to bring his queen out, but then white could take here and take on d5. Putting some pressure here on e3, but white quickly responds with knight f4. So do you take with the knight maybe? The knight does look more active here over on the king side. Yes, he does take with a knight. And obviously black doesn't take on f4. That would be stupid. So all these guys are pointing towards e6 now. And this knight is about to continue here up the board. Maybe knight at h5. What do you do? Knight g4. So white thinks the time is right to launch an attack here, getting 2 pawns for the piece, and white does want to keep the f-file open because now you have stuff like bishop f7 check, and the black king is in big trouble then. Wow. This blocks an exit for the black king. He needs to take with the king, or else it's mate on f7. And now white simply picks up a queen. And it's made on c8. 7-2 JannLee, and off we go. This is the last game of the match. So once again JannLee picking the kingside fianchetto defense. And now Kleerkast is putting his bishop here on d3. And since JannLee is defending d5, Kleerkast goes for some sort of dark squared attack. White was threatening to pick up the bishop and then take on g4, so JannLee quickly gives up his queen and castles. So black has two pieces for a queen and a pawn. And the pawn on d6 does not look very strong. Maybe black will pick it up. Yeah, so maybe white is just looking to repeat moves here. Let's say black had moved his bishop, white could take on a8 and then rook d8 and then keep on doing that. But black is trying to win here. White is forced to give up his queen, and this bishop is covering d8. Well, now it looks like black will just pick up these pawns in a while. White can't even take on e3. So probably take with this pawn, because if you take here, white can play pawn at f7 and then take on e3 with check. JannLee thinking a lot here. He could take the queen though, but it looks scary. It does take the bishop. if white plays pawn at h7, let's say, the black king can take cover in front of the white pawn. I was thinking maybe just retreat with the bishop, with the knight. This gives white a lot of material. So attacking h4 and attacking e3. Remember that black has 2 queens in hand. Kleerkast thinking, trying to find some way of going forward here. But I'm afraid there is no way. So this at least threatens mate on f7. The e3 pawn was still hanging, and now you can just pick up a knight for free. So white is looking to play rook f8, but it doesn't have much material left. So rook here, queen on g1 maybe? No, something else. Well, what is happening here? JannLee sort of panicked, and now rook f8 is even stronger. Black has more pieces than he had before. Now the king will run. And the white has run out of checks here, so black will finish this. 8-2 JannLee. Let me just check the end of that game. Oh wait, what's this? This game. So if black moves the bishop, yeah, it's a perpetual, and white should have taken e8. Bishop b6 looks strong. As I said, knight f5 looked very good here, but this is also good, although a bit tricky. black finds a forced mate here. Yeah, queen h4. He should have taken on h3 here with the queen. Let's look at that in the end, because now, no, white doesn't have anything. Rook f8, but it sure looked dangerous. But there was a forced mate here. Queen takes, and then you have so many pieces here, so you can give up the rook on g2 just to get another check, and pawn g4, and it's mate in the next move actually. Either king here and you have queen h5, or king g2 and queen h3. Look how well the bishop and queen are helping each other cover all squares around the white king. So thank you so much for watching. JannLee took this 8-2 as predicted. And later tonight Zyxan is playing Burp Cow in a little more than 1 hour. I'm not sure if anyone is covering that match. I won't be able to do that, but maybe I'll be back later tonight to watch Opperwesen versus Burp Cow. That will be an interesting match. Thanks for watching and see you.